My name is Michaela Randolph, and I am a senior watershed specialist with Hill Bay and a member of the Living Schoolyards Coalition. So, in addition to welcoming you to the Natural History Museum, let me get my notes on, I'm just kidding. So I just want to first share this story. So a couple of months ago, I was in attendance at a conference, and I was listening to the story from someone who was speaking, who spoke of the Maasai tribe in eastern Kenya. And instead of saying a traditional good morning or good evening, they greet each other by asking, how are the children? And so when we think about what we're doing here today, why we are assembled, I think we ask ourselves and each other, how are the children? We should think about what that response is. So, as I said, it's very awe-inspiring to see so many of you in the room and so much interest in this event. Before I move too far into our agenda, I want to acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous lands. We are on the Indigenous Tonga territory, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Indigenous leaders, past, present, and emerging. Through land acknowledgements, we elevate the Indigenous community as the vibrant community they are and help to mitigate cultural erasure. So we thought of hosting a convening to discuss the important issues of greening and opening our school campuses for community use. We knew we needed to be in a place that would exemplify what we want to see on our schoolyards. As a member of the Board of Governors, welcome to the Natural History Museum. I have so many fond memories of coming here on school field trips as a child, and then chaperoning trips for my own daughter, and now as a member of the board, it's a completely different experience. The Natural History Museums include not only the Natural History Museum here at Exposition Park, but also includes the La Brea Tar Pits. NHM is one of the oldest cultural institutions in Los Angeles. Today it serves as the anchor of an emerging cultural, educational, and entertainment hub in Exposition Park. So let's talk about where we are today. We are currently in the Otis Booth Pavilion, which, and as you look behind me, you will find yourself looking at the nature gardens, and many of you experienced that as you were eating your morning breakfast. And so just a little bit about the nature gardens. The nature gardens epitomize Natural History Museum's commitment to being a recognized leader in the study of urban biodiversity, and a leading proponent of a philosophy that nature is everywhere and for everyone. The gardens were designed by Mia Lair's studio in LA and opened in 2013 with major support from a $7 million grant funded by Prop 84, adding 3.5 acres of sustainable landscape gardens and outdoor learning spaces on both the north and west sides of the museum. So now just a little bit about the Living Schoolyards Coalition. LA's Living Schoolyard Coalition, and you'll notice we have these name tags with little green badge underneath, so if folks want to raise their hand or you see us, then you'll know we're all members of the coalition. We formed in response to various success to school greening within Los Angeles Unified School District. The coalition is a group of nonprofit organizations, educators, school greening practitioners, researchers, landscape designers who create and advocate for equitable and healthy school environments to support physical and mental health. Please note, we don't simply use the word green, we use living, because a living schoolyard is so much more than just a green schoolyard. It is a place where students are encouraged to thrive and explore their environment, a place where administrators and teachers can find respite in their space. So with that, we will go to our first opening remarks. I just want to make sure folks are here. So our first speaker is going to be Andrea Amritz. She is joined the California Natural Resources Agency in August of 2020 as the Deputy Lead Secretary of External Affairs. Andrea oversees engagements with community leaders, intergovernmental partners, and cross-industry stakeholders. She previously served as Chief Operating Officer at nonprofit federal government, including for the 44th U.S. President Barack Obama, as White House Deputy Director of Private Sector Engagement. She is a Los Angeles native and has earned undergraduate degrees from DePaul University and holds a Master of Public Policy degree from the University of California at Berkeley. Andrea can be found visiting local beaches and dog parks with her pup. So please welcome Andrea.
Hey everyone, good morning. So good to see you and so great to see some friendly faces here, all in the coalition in the fight for some of the good work that we're doing together. So interestingly, I am based here in Los Angeles. I'm a LA native, even though our office is in Sacramento. So whenever you do have a chance to visit up in Sacramento, please do come visit our new Natural Resources Agency building, which has a living garden upstairs on our rooftop. Not a schoolyard yet, but we're pretty consistent with the theme here. Wanted to start focusing our conversation around some of the investments that the state has made that we're incredibly proud of through the governor's leadership as well as the state legislature. But first, I really want to just level set. For those that aren't familiar with the California Natural Resources Agency, I will say you are partially home right now. We oversee Exposition Park, including the Natural History Museum grounds, including Bank of California Stadium, and the California African American Museum, the California Science Center, and all the grounds here. So welcome over here. Thank you, Michaela, and the Natural History Museum for having us today, and especially for the Living Schoolyards Coalition. We know that our mission is to ensure for future generations that we are restoring and protecting our natural lands, our waters, our rivers, and this is, I think, really appropriate in that for future generations, we have that stewardship duty and task. And isn't it fitting that here we are talking about utilizing those exact same schoolyards for those next generation of stewards? So as I joke with friends, this is the kind of climate justice league that we are preparing for the future. So let's talk maybe a bit about how California and how the governor and the state legislature have really advanced some of the commitments to addressing extreme heat and also by proxy greening schoolyards. Just this past year in 2021, we had, in accumulation with some of the investments this year, we had an $800 million commitment from the governor and from the legislature to address extreme heat. I mean, that's $800 million that we didn't have before for climate change, so we are incredibly excited about that. And we are also doubling down on our commitment. This year, we have additional investments that will together bring us to $1.5 billion of climate investments for the state of California. We are leading the way. We're super excited about that. And with your help, we really are going to change the face of this work. A part and a very significant piece of that is our commitment to greening schoolyards. We absolutely recognize the value of shifting and moving away from the asphalt yards that we have and really putting in some natural landscapes. Not only can they be multi-use and purpose and hopefully benefit the community, but we have a couple of additional ideas on how it can benefit our economy and how it can also benefit our local communities. 2021 was the hottest summer on record. Everyone probably remembers that. And, you know, it's a warm day today, so we'll see how this summer does for us as well. Fresno saw over 60 days of temperatures over 100 degrees. And our estimates are saying that we, by 2100, will see a 9-degree Fahrenheit percent increase, or a 9% temperature increase. So I thought about that and I thought, so someone born today will in fact experience that year 2100 9-degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature. So it really is incumbent upon us to be responsible for the work that we do today to benefit our future generations. We recently delivered and released our State Extreme Heat Action Plan. Within that, we seek to mitigate our economic, historic, cultural, ecological, and social impacts of extreme heat. Related to that, we have a $50 million commitment to greening schoolyard efforts in the state of California for the next 2 years. So that's $50 million on the table that we have committed at the state level to make this something we're excited about. That funding will go to CAL FIRE, which we also oversee at our agency, and we're awaiting the legislature's allocation for that. So please do let your legislative representatives know that we're supportive of that commitment. Also, this is to complement $250 million for the Urban and Community Forest Grant Program, which we also committed last year. So together, $300 million for this work to benefit schools across the state. So we are absolutely pleased to continue this work. We know that our agency has been doing some of this work to date, so we have some experience, but we're really going to need your help to help us define what we need to do in state government to address some of this work. For example, are there policy changes that we need to make? Are there analyses that we need to conduct to identify where we invest for greening schoolyards and living schoolyards? We know that the extreme heat disproportionately impacts vulnerable communities, so we need to understand how we can invest some of our monies in the most effective and efficient way. I'll also mention that we are very excited to partner with school districts, and that's why I'm very thrilled that we have LAUSD board member, my board member, in fact, Nick Malboyne here today as well. His leadership and LAUSD's leadership, as you all know, is really pivotal for this work. We see an opportunity for us to create a new workforce with this commitment, which I think is really exciting, a climate-smart workforce. For example, how can we think about transitioning some of the job opportunities that we have at the state, at the school district level, and the city level to support some of this work? We also have an opportunity to work with our interagency partners, so we will be working with the Department of Education, with the Division of School Architects, with DGS, many that you are already familiar with working with. So I do want to reiterate the state and our agency's commitment to this work. We're excited about it. We know that there is so much more work that we can do together. We're looking forward to that journey. So thank you for helping us create that new Climate Justice League for the future, and please do use us as a resource, and let us know if you have any questions about how we can really drive this effort forward. Thank you so much.
And next, I would like to introduce to you, Nick Malboyne, who many of you know, who's proud to serve as the Vice President of the Los Angeles Unified School District Board of Education. He represents District 4. He's born and raised on the west side of LA, and Nick's election to the board in May of 2017 follows a career fighting for our city's school children as a teacher and an advocate. Nick is truly a champion of this work. Every time I see Nick in any setting, he's always like, this makes so much sense, like we gotta get it done. And that heartens me every time. So without further ado, welcome Nick Malboyne.
Well, good morning. It's such a pleasure seeing you all. And I have to say, I've just seen the size of this group early on a Wednesday morning. This is really a moment or an idea whose time has come. And so I'm grateful that all these seeds, if you will, pardon the pun, are finally starting to take root. I actually, speaking of seeds, I just walked through the butterfly pavilion, and so I want to start. It's still early, so I want to start with a quick full story and then a joke, and then I'll get to the remarks. But a few months ago, I was at Hancock Park Elementary School, which is one of the schools I represent, and as I was walking out, a group of fifth graders asked if they could stop me to ask me a question, and I said, of course. And they had said they just read an article in the LA Times in their class about the monarch butterfly population and how it was threatening California, and they wanted to save the butterflies. And I said, that's a wonderful idea, what are you going to do about it? And they said, well, we want to raise some money to get some milkweed and start a butterfly garden. And I said, that's great. How much do you need to raise? And the kid, $20. 60. I mean, the teacher had said, listen, we can raise $100, we can buy a lot of milkweed. And so I told the students what I thought was a very clever deal. I said, I will make you a deal. Whatever you raise, I will match. So if you raise, and we did a little math lesson, if you raise $40 and the kids said, oh, we'll get $80. And I left, patting myself on the back like, oh, I just won the, not that they're voters, but I won the support of these fifth graders. And I got a call like 2 weeks later from the teacher who said somewhat sheepishly, well, the students were so inspired by your match that they raised $1,500. And I must say that I found out that my staff had also donated to this effort. So I wrote a check for $1,500 and I said, you better save all the damn butterflies. When I was there just 2 weeks ago, we cut the ribbon on this butterfly garden at Hancock Park Elementary. We actually named it for the outgoing principal who's been principal of that school for 22 years. And I told the students a joke that I think was a little over their head, but we'll try it this time. So there's a group of diplomats who are sitting around the table talking about which culture is better and which language is better. And at that very moment, a butterfly lands on the table. And the Brit says, oh, see, this is why English is the most beautiful language, because this perfect creature is called a butterfly. And the Spaniard says, no. In Espanol, this creature is called mariposa. And then the Frenchman says, no. Very, very French. In French, we call this papillon. And then the Italian says, no, in Italiano, this creature is called farfalle, like the pasta, farfalle. And then the Norwegian says, in Norwegian, we call this sumafjord, summer. And the German, looking all huffy, says, and what's wrong with Schmetterling? So, there you go. We're going to have a second butterfly if you do. Okay, and that, I say that story, but not only because I was walking past the pavilion, but just, it really does give me hope that the next generation is better than we were at this, and the fact that they're already thinking about saving monarch butterflies with now their $3,000 butterfly garden really does give me a lot of inspiration for this work going forward. I want to thank, I won't be brief, but I want to thank the Living Schoolyard Coalition for inviting me to attend this meeting. I'm here on behalf of my colleague Jackie Goldberg as well, and the entire board, which, as you'll hear from my remarks, has a unified commitment to this work. It's an issue that is so crucial to our kids, to our schools. When I brought a outdoor education resolution last year that the board passed unanimously, one of the advocates who spoke on behalf of it had said, we have to teach this next generation of children to fall in love with the planet we're asking them to save. And I think about that and how this work is connected. As we think about the extreme heat, I was just in Idaho over the long weekend. Yellowstone is closed for the first time in 34 years because of massive flooding. As we're seeing this across the world, we're counting on our students who are in our schools, not today, but maybe they're in summer school. We have a great summer school program to save this planet. We need them to fall in love with it. And they're not going to fall in love with it if they're in a concrete jungle. They're going to fall in love with it when we have gardens, when we have grass, when we have wildlands, and when we bring them to places like this. Our students need and deserve an opportunity to learn outdoors, and it's something that one of the silver linings of the pandemic, I think, made us realize, especially in a climate like Southern California, we should be outdoors all the time. And it was even before COVID that we were only out there by necessity. I remember when I was teaching Watts in South LA, it was only when there was a jackhammer literally doing construction outside my classroom that I took my students out to a garden to read, and I saw how much more focused they were and how they saw things from a different perspective. And it's something that we shouldn't take, in that case, an errant jackhammer or a pandemic to get us outside. I just want to be very brief about what we're already doing at LA Unified. Some of you may have seen our new superintendent's comments in the LA Times a few months ago, but I was quite strategic in the schools that I walked into in his first week. And I wouldn't say, if you were here, that he walked into my trap, but he kind of walked into my trap because we brought him to schools. His first observation was there's so much asphalt. And how, when you're in Southern California, is this not green and lush? And so he's already committed as one of his initiatives in the first 100-day plan to start greening our schools. We just made public, and we'll share with you all the list, the index, the criteria, the algorithm by which we're going to choose in a very ethical way which schools we're going to start with. But whether it's increase in the seeds grant or using state money that Andrea was talking about, or yesterday when the board passed the budget, we added $58 million of new money to continue the greening work. Yes, thank you. I'll also say yesterday that we bought a camp I had just thrown out what I thought was maybe a crazy idea about a year ago, that in addition to some of the small properties that we own, that LA Unified should be in the business of outdoor education year-round. And yesterday we just bought, those of you who are familiar with the landscape, we bought Canyon Creek, which is up by Lake Castaic. LA Unified, as of yesterday, is the proud owner of that 86-acre property. Okay, I'm getting the time notification. This work cannot be done without all of you. Like I said at the beginning, this is a moment whose time has come. I think everyone is working, rowing in the same direction as we think about seeds grants and greening and outdoor education and camps. We really need you to, I would say keep your foot on the pedal, but that's not the most apt environmental analogy. So I'll just say, keep on, going down that path, that green path. You have a true champion, not just in me, but I know all of the board members and our new superintendent, and look forward to coming back at a future convening when we can show more progress that we've made together for the kids at LA. So thank you so much.
Thank you again, Nick and everyone, for your leadership here. So a couple of things that I failed to remind you. So just a morning review with a few things that might be in Los Angeles, and past president of the Southwest chapter of the American College of Sports and Medicine. She is a certified exercise physiologist and physical activity and public health researcher. A lot of P words there for me, sorry. She has over a decade of experience collaborating with public health departments, school districts, hospitals, and nonprofits to evaluate family-focused and school-based health promotion interventions. Most recently, she has leveraged her educational background, professional networks, and location to decrease income-based disparities in physical activity, participation, and well-being in urban Los Angeles through living schoolyard planning and evaluation efforts. Her work has been published in peer-reviewed journals, including the American Journal of Preventative Medicine, Health Promotion Practice, Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise, Journal of Physical Activity and Health, among others. And she also authored health-related pages on the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative website, sponsored by Green Schoolyards America. Claire Lachlan is a professor of landscape architecture at Cal Poly Pomona and author of Schools That Heal, Design with Mental Health in Mind. She has practiced landscape architecture for 16 years, and her work focuses on design strategies that support public health, equity, and climate resilience. Claire has collaboratively designed campuses and schoolyards that support mental health and well-being, including Eagle Rock Elementary School. She is the founder of the Collaborative for Healthy and Inclusive Learning Environments at Cal Poly Pomona, which partners university students with K-12 schools and districts to co-design healthy, inclusive learning environments. Please welcome Marcy Clark.
Good morning. Thank you to Michaela for the introduction, and thank you to Living Schoolyard Coalition Convening Committee for inviting me to speak today. I am so honored to be in a room full of Living Schoolyard advocates. For the next few minutes, I'm going to highlight opportunities to improve the health and well-being of Los Angeles youth. In the urban environment, Living Schoolyards can address many of the health inequities experienced by low-income, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Today, I'm going to focus on heat and physical activity. Problem one, heat and pollution. Large swaths of asphalt with high surface temperatures contribute to urban heat islands and average temperatures that are 6 degrees hotter than the desert. Children suffer the greatest consequences of living in the urban heat island, especially when their schools are covered by asphalt. Additionally, the close proximity of many schools to freeways contributes to high pollution exposure. When children are in this environment, they have high heart rates, high blood pressure, experience bronchoconstriction, and asthma. Pre-pandemic, asthma accounted for nearly 18% of chronic absenteeism in Los Angeles schools. Because children are closer to the ground, they are closer to the generated heat by asphalt. Children have relatively low sweat rates. However, they generate excessive body heat due to rapid growth. Children are less likely to perceive increases in their own body temperature and therefore do not take the appropriate precautions to avoid overheating, such as consuming water or seeking shade. This leads to dehydration, effects including nausea, headache, fatigue, dizziness. When children return to the classroom, they have difficulty concentrating and learning. Solution? Trees! Trees! One of the most effective ways to cool surface temperatures and the air temperature at the height of the children is to plant trees. In a recent study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, it was shown that the warming effect of concrete and asphalt was effectively reduced when the tree canopy coverage met 40% threshold. Trees are also excellent at removing air pollution from the environment. Problem 2, physical inactivity. Green space shortage in our neighborhoods, combined with limited school district funding, and to a certain extent the explosion of technology, has contributed to a relatively sedentary youth. The Los Angeles County Department of Public Health reports that less than 16% of students between the ages of 6 and 17 meet the federal physical activity guidelines. Nearly 11% of all LA children and adolescents are completely sedentary, with no significant increase in energy expenditure throughout the day. Traditional asphalt schoolyards, designed primarily for ball sports, cater to the interests of boys, thereby exacerbating physical inactivity levels for Los Angeles girls. Physical inactivity or sedentary behavior, and lack of access to healthy food options in the urban environment contribute to obesity. Indeed, 25% of our LA students have been classified as obese. This number is even higher for students from low-income families and for students of color. Physical inactivity and obesity are very strong individual predictors of poor neurocognitive functioning and poor academic performance. On the other hand, when children are exposed to nature on a regular basis and participate in the recommended levels of physical activity, there's a synergistic benefit to immune system function, brain development, social interactions, focus and concentration, standardized test scores, graduation rates, and so much more. Solution number 2, increase the diversity of play zones in elementary schoolyards. Our observational studies suggest that a higher percentage of the student body is active when a school has more unique play zones. The introduction of park-like grass fields and outdoor classrooms with trees leads to better utilization of the schoolyard. Less crowding of individual spaces due to greater choice and to more shade throughout the yard also leads to fewer antisocial interactions. In asphalt schoolyards, most of the active students are engaged in activities such as handball, tetherball, foursquare, the traditional playground games. Unfortunately, a majority of recess is consumed by waiting for one's turn in these games. In evidence-based living schoolyards, a higher percentage of students can be seen engaging in gymnastics, dance, climbing, jumping, running, and tag. Activities that allow more students to be active at the same time and allow individual students to accumulate more active minutes at recess. Outdoor classrooms allow students to dig in the dirt and collaborate with others. These pro-social interactions have been observed as students build miniature communities in the woodshed. We've also observed the students working together in a caterpillar formation as they jump from log to log, making sure that no one in the line touches the hot lava decomposed granite floor. Solution 3, reimagine the physical education curriculum. By the 4th grade, most students have already adopted the physical activity behaviors that they will practice as adults. In addition, in asphalt schoolyards, physical activity levels decline as students progress from 1st to 6th grade. However, in evidence-based living schoolyards, the physical activity levels for the vulnerable 5th and 6th grade students are comparable to those of their younger counterparts. It must be noted that not all green renovations are created equal. Our results indicate that replacing asphalt with a grass sports field is not sufficient to minimize the physical activity inequities between girls and boys or between younger and older students. Additionally, boredom and consequently bullying are more common on spaces that do not afford for age-appropriate motor skill challenge, something that can be easily achieved by introducing obstacles at different distances and at different heights. Physical activity, self-efficacy, and motor skill development are key aspects of physical education. By reimagining the PE curriculum, with skill-based lessons on uneven surfaces and with nature-based features, we can move beyond the purely sports-based facility model and best serve all students. Solution number 4, engage the end users in schoolyard design. School communities are asking for more nature on their schoolyards. Intuitively, students and teachers know and understand the power of living materials. Children are craving spaces that are not confined to the adult-centered design standards, typically characterized by straight lines, well-manicured grass, symmetrical plant arrangements, and a predetermined purpose. Teachers are craving options for curricular connections. In addition to the aforementioned benefits, when schoolyards are designed with community input and they include trees, there's more school pride and a big elevation of environmental stewardship that was mentioned at the beginning of this session. There are multiple benefits, clearly, to removing asphalt and replacing it with nature-based features. However, the design of the space matters. In order to optimize physical activity, social interaction, academic achievement benefits, by the way, those academic achievement benefits have been seen at Eagle Rock Elementary, where there is a significant narrowing of the academic achievement gap between low-income and non-low-income students in all subject areas. Those benefits can only be possible if elementary schoolyards are designed with multiple, diverse, unique play zones, complete with nature features that allow motor skill challenge and allow students to engage in collaborative play in small groups.
It is hard to make healthy schools, even in neighborhoods that have plenty of resources. Most school environments fall short of supporting students' physical and mental health and well-being. Too few know that in addition to the physical health benefits that Marcy shared, nurturing, nature-filled environments improve mental health, provide a sense of safety and belonging, reduce crime, and improve academic success. Why do we need healthy schools?
In 2019, 37% of high school students had persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, an increase of 40% since 2009. 2/3 of LGBTQ+ youth reported these symptoms of depression. 1 out of every 5 high school students had seriously contemplated suicide over the past year, including 1 out of every 4 girls and nearly half of those identifying as LGBTQ+. And this was before the 2020 pandemic and a national reckoning on police brutality and structural racism laid bare the injustices of our health, criminal, environmental, and education systems. Over half of students with mental health issues will never be diagnosed, and even if they are, 60% of youth with major depression do not receive treatment. Teachers are at their breaking point too. In a RAND research study last year, teachers reported nearly double the rates of job-related stress and nearly triple the rates of depression than other U.S. adults. Our schools' physical environments are not helping. The most common descriptor I hear from students and teachers about their school is that they look and feel like prisons. Of course, there are exceptions. Recent conversations around hardening schools against violence, against gun violence in particular, are both disturbing and unsupported by research. While guns are now the leading cause of death among American children and teens, the likelihood of a student experiencing an active school shooter is 0.003%. Hardened campuses and active shooter drills increase trauma and anxiety. A 2020 study found that current and former students were the shooters in over 80% of school shootings. A more effective response might be to create softened, student-centered learning environments that meet the basic needs of all students, particularly those suffering trauma. Children, teenagers, and teachers spend most of their waking hours at school. Districts struggle to find resources to support counseling, mental health, and restorative justice programs. As we grapple with how to improve environmental justice and equity, address rising temperatures and drought, and how to safely keep our schools open in a pandemic age, school design with mental health in mind provides some strong solutions. We can support all of these initiatives by designing schools to become environmental and social safety nets for all students, families, and communities who use them. A groundbreaking 1980s study found that hospital patients recover faster and request less pain medication when their rooms have views of trees. This work launched a movement of therapeutic gardens in healthcare environments. There is no parallel initiative to design schools with mental health and healing in mind until now. It is time to build that movement. We can design schoolyards to boost the immune system, improve academic outcomes, help heal trauma, reduce stress and anxiety, increase the sense of safety, and improve environmental health and climate resilience. We can design schools that heal. Central to this work is to work with communities and natural processes to create culturally relevant and healthier places. I'll share a few strategies to describe 3 main principles of schools that heal. They nurture a sense of belonging, they provide nature-filled places, and they inspire awe, curiosity, and wonder. First, they nurture a sense of belonging. Students and teachers have the most at stake from their school environments, but as Marcy mentioned, are rarely engaged in designing schools. The simple act of asking them what they experience and need at schools gives us important information on how schools are used and perceived, and helps students and teachers feel valued and heard, both vital ingredients in nurturing a sense of community and belonging. We can also honor students' lived experiences, histories, and abilities. This could include co-creating art, growing and serving foods that reflect students' cultures and traditions, and providing experiential, diverse, and universally accessible learning environments. We can support students' feelings of safety through design. A doctoral study on 100 high schools in Michigan found that larger classroom windows and higher human activity on the streets in front of schools associated with less student crime. An open campus policy allowing students to leave freely for lunch, and natural features next to school buildings associated with more students planning to go to four-year colleges. Wide open views, even if they were of living grass, related to more student crime and disorderly conduct, and fewer students planning to go to college. Instead of designing campuses to be surveilled, we can design them to be schools and gardens, breaking up large areas to give students and teachers small, cozy spaces to rest and recuperate, as well as learn and play. Provide nature-filled places. We can design with nature to create comfortable indoor and outdoor environments with less energy, water, and resource use. Living schoolyards can support experiential learning, environmental literacy, and green jobs training. We have an opportunity to honor students' broad range of interests and abilities while making local, nature-based goods and incubating local, nature-based businesses. Districts can hire local trades and craftspeople, artists, horticulturalists, and small business owners to teach and guide students to become entrepreneurs. We can also invite community elders into schools to volunteer in the gardens and act as informal mentors, seeking out students who might need support and advice, and to build community around our elders. Design for awe, curiosity, and wonder. Our students need and deserve a world full of wonder and intrigue, a school site that engages their curiosity and sparks their imagination, a place where they want to be. Beauty, warmth, wonder, and awe improve mental health and well-being. Awe makes us feel humble, small, and insignificant in a way that makes us feel connected to the world around us. Create schoolyards to captivate a child or tug at a teen's sense of self. What moments take them out of their worries and anxieties and bring them back into the world and their bodies? What moments spark their curiosity and imagination? These are the moments to aspire to in school design. Students who are inspired, awed, or simply comfortable are more likely to show up, ready to learn. And during moments of stress or anxiety, these special places and moments become anchors to hold on to. At a whole district or city scale, we can improve public health, equity, and climate resilience by reversing inequitable access to parks, trees, and gardens, and provide the co-benefits they bring: cleaner air, water, and soil, stronger communities, green jobs, and career technical training opportunities, and restorative environments for students, teachers, and communities. Students, like the rest of us, need a new vision of the future and hope for themselves, their communities, and their planets. We can remake schools into nurturing, nature-filled, and awe-inspiring places to learn and heal and be whole. The physical design of our schools can improve the lives of the hundreds or thousands of children and teenagers that attend each day and support the teachers and staff who are there to help them. Now more than ever, we need to create schools that heal. Thank you.
Public health, schools, parents, design, engineers, stormwater even, and it takes all of us. And so I just want you to continue to realize and recognize that there is just this power and collaboration, and we're so much stronger together. So thank you again to Marcy and Claire. So now I'm going to be introducing our first panel. There are two today, which aims to be a model of success. And so the model of success panel will highlight examples of where green and joint use have been successful and hold up these models of success for inspiration and proof of concept. I would like to welcome Alex Johnson, who will be moderating this panel. Alex is Chief of Staff to the Vice President of Programs at the California Wellness Foundation. He provides high-level strategic support and counsel on grant-making priorities and special projects, overall departmental strategy, and operations and external engagement. He was appointed to his current position in April 2022, so he's still fresh and new in it. Congratulations. And then before that, Johnson previously served as interim vice president of programs. Prior to that, he was a program director who managed grant-making focused on environmental justice, reducing community violence, gun violence prevention, and youth justice. So welcome, Alex.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, you all can do better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. I am excited to be here this morning and moderate this panel to take us through this conversation around models of success. And so I want to bring up our panelists. Kira Maritano, who is project manager at Trust for Public Land. Where is Kira? Kira, come on, Kira. Brad, why don't you give Kira a big round of applause? Brad, wonderful. He is the principal of Esperanza Elementary School. Brad, come on up. Kiesa, who is the Convene Schoolyards America California State Director. Give Alejandra. And so my role is simple. I'm going to help facilitate this conversation. I'm going to take a seat in a second, but this conversation is really centered around what is possible. Talking about the immense possibilities of greening schoolyards. And our goal this morning is to inspire you and is to drive you to action. Let me just make a couple of housekeeping notes. One housekeeping note in particular, there are no cards on your table. And so we want to encourage you to write your questions down. Write your questions down as you're listening to the panelists. Volunteers will be around to collect those questions for Q&A. We hope to have a robust conversation in our time together this morning. Before we dive into the panel, let me just provide a little context setting. Some of this will be preaching to the choir, so you all are the amen quarters. But I want to provide a little context setting and framing before we jump into the questions to our esteemed group of panelists. Green schoolyards, that are open to the public after hours are an essential way to get at core issues that face vulnerable students across Los Angeles. And unequivocally, this is an environmental and a social justice issue. Whether historic or racist planning practices, redlining, et cetera, have created conditions where not all kids have access to green spaces or even shade. It's unacceptable. And for some students, a green schoolyard is their only access to nature. Some of our schools, current prison-like environments, send damaging messages to children about what they deserve, what their communities deserve, what their families deserve. They affect learning and community on campus. When it's hot, you see increased aggression, while schools with lots of trees and a variety of outdoor spaces to play and learn support positive mental health, positive social behavior, and academic success. As schools and districts are rethinking their approach away from punitive discipline and towards restorative justice, our school environments are likely contributing to attention, behavior, and academic struggles. And living schoolyards, green schoolyards can reduce stress, anxiety, improve behavior, and ultimately an ability to learn. We have to look at this issue from an urgency standpoint, and we can and have an opportunity to change these conditions. And so that's why I'm excited this morning to have this conversation with our panelists, who will hopefully inspire us, well, not hopefully, who will inspire us to talk about the various models of success that they have been a part of across this state. And so I want to open the panel up with an opening question, a simple question. And we'll start with Brad. Brad, what do you believe is the most powerful, the best thing that has come out of the great Schoolyards work that you have participated?
Well, I think if the 20th century was about build, baby, build, and just get those schoolyards out there, I think the 21st century has to be about stewardship. And I think the work that we have done has offered a pathway for children in their elementary years to really build within themselves that sense of stewardship, which really will be required for this century. And what we've learned is in the incidental learning that takes place on campus, sometimes formal, whether it's a formal lesson or incidental during, say, recess, the children are building up a confidence within themselves. They're understanding the natural world around them, and they're able to see that they possess really powers, unique powers of identification of the natural world. They're communicating with one another. They're able to compare and contrast regarding native species, plants, the things that they're experiencing on campus. And so that spills over into a more confident sense of self. So really, the two things that come up for me are about stewardship and then also about just self-confidence.
Thank you. Kira.
Hey. I think the most important thing that has come out of this work that I've had the pleasure of participating in is seeing how landscapes can support communities, and just seeing how impactful making a space that resonates with a child, with a parent, with a teacher is to building community movements and really supporting what we want to see happening at our schools, right? Schools are community spaces. 1 in 5 Californians visits a school every day. So these places should support us on an emotional level and on a physical level. And I want to share just a very specific anecdote, which is that we work at a school in Oakland called Bridges Academy. And Bridges Academy has a really large population of Hmong-speaking families, so families that have immigrated from southern Mexico and Central America. And they've mostly moved from areas that are really rural jungle communities. And they've moved to this part of East Oakland that has the bottom 10% of tree canopy in the state. It has the over 90% highest asthma rates of any part of California. So this environment is so jarring to these students. And when I think about what these schoolyard transformations can do for just imagining one specific student from that community who's moved to East Oakland and is feeling totally lost, it feels worth it. And I know that in this room of advocates for children and nature, every one of you can think of 100 students who would benefit from a space like that and in a way that's meaningful to them in their life story. So I think thinking about the scale of that impact is what really makes the work meaningful to me.
Thank you, Kira. Alejandra, same question to you. You've heard that it's a confidence builder, that it's building community. What are you seeing as the most impactful piece of work that's come out of this movement?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here with this great group of people. Let me back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about the Oakland work. So this was a partnership between the Oakland School District, the Trust for Public Land, Green Schoolyards America, and many other organizations. Kind of something along the lines of what you're doing here, kind of building this this collective movement. And we did work. I'm saying we. I'm representing the collective of everyone that worked on this. And we did work at the district level, helping change the system to be able to then build the projects as described. And to me, one of the key things that came out of it is this sense of ownership and empowerment that came. It was not only felt at the school level, but also at the district level, seeing how the facilities department and everyone felt like, yeah, we are doing this together and this is the right thing to do for the children. I think everyone embraced the concept and saw the benefits firsthand after the first 2 projects were built. Thank you.
So let me stay on you, Alejandra, to start with. you've helped to create really a 5-school pilot in Oakland. Really some important work that's been done with Oakland Unified School District. Let's just get to brass tacks. Can you talk about and go into what were some of the barriers that you had to overcome in order for that project to be successful, and it has been successful? Give us a little sense of what those barriers were. And here I want to set you up to talk about a bit about facilities as well and some of that interaction. But Alejandra, why don't you start with this? What were the barriers?
I think all the barriers are associated with the fact that this what's needed is a big systems change, and in order to have a big systems change, you need dedicated capacity, resources, and expertise to make that happen. And school districts cannot do it by themselves because they have too many competing priorities, too many things to deal with, pandemic, budget crisis. There were so many things. So I think, again, the challenge is that in order to change a system that has been there for decades, perpetuating great schoolyards, there needs to be a lot of hands on deck. So the way we did it was understanding all the issues that the district was dealing with, and trying to propose green schoolyards as a solution to many of those challenges, and try to support what they were already doing instead of trying to plop it on top of everything else as an additional thing. For example, school districts do a facilities master planning process every 5 to 10 years. Okay, how can we help and participate in that and make sure that the facilities master plan includes green schoolyards? And that happened. Then facility master plans are what the district uses to then put ballot measures for the voters to approve so they can get funding for those facility upgrades. So we helped in that Measure Y campaign that passed and ensure that there is money for district-wide initiatives, including green schoolyards. Also, when they were doing polling, paid for having a few additional questions about greening on the polls, and yes, surprisingly, greening schoolyards was up there below health and safety, seismic upgrades and things like that, but it was pretty up there for voters. So then after that Measure Y passed, then the district had additional funding to also contribute to this effort, and has been a great partner. There's state funding funds a lot of greening elements, but sometimes you're required to do ADA improvements and other improvements that state funding doesn't pay for, so then the district can actually pay for that. So anyway, that's a lot to say. Yes, there's barriers, but they're not a lack of desire by the school districts to do it. I think it's the capacity and the resources needed for a systems change. And I really appreciate this convening, because this is a great step towards that change in the system.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, have you heard about facilities master planning, the process that Alejandra took us through around getting to the place where we have this sort of powerful work embedded in community? Tell us a bit about your experience in working with some of the inner workings of a district to move this work forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a pleasure working with Alejandra on that partnership. And actually, a colleague who's here today told me a quote this morning, or an idiom, which is, "Partnerships move at the speed of trust." And it really hit, because that was our experience, right? We came in, the Trust for Public Land and Green Schoolyards America came in, and I'll speak for myself. I have a background in environmental education. I was pretty young when I got going. I was ready to come out the gate, like, let's do this. Let's build some green schoolyards, right? What's the holdup? And I think Oakland Unified School District and many other school districts have not had the bandwidth to do these projects in a long-term sustainable way. So a lot of kind of guerrilla gardens have popped up, and they don't have long-term stewardship, and they come from the right place, but they fall apart. And so we took a really slow and steady approach. Like, let's work together, let's make a partnership agreement, let's prove to you that we're here to help and that we see you. And what happened for me personally is that my empathy for the maintenance people grew hugely, right? My empathy for the buildings and grounds grew for the facilities people. It keeps growing, right? They are working on a shoestring budget, they have limited staff, they're not bad people, they want to do the right thing, but they're looking at me like, how are we supposed to maintain that? And we're still figuring that out, but I think we've moved to a point in the partnership where we're figuring it out together, and we're looking at things together, and they trust that we hold space for the struggles they face, and they trust that we're not here to do some flash in the pan thing. We're here to really build a system, like Alejandra said. One project that we've been working on over the last couple of years that we're about to close with Oakland Unified School District is an update to their design guidelines and standards, which is a standard document that any facilities department might have. And theirs, had 8-foot-high chain link fence and rubber tiles and concrete as the basic materials that can be spec'd at a school. And so they kind of kept handing us this document, like, here's our standards, go ahead, build what you can build. And I said, I can't build a green schoolyard with these. So we really brought everyone to the table, facilities, buildings and grounds, teachers, principals, health and wellness. And we said, let's talk about this, really the brass tacks, the materials. What are we building a fence out of that protects the planting? What kind of fall surface material are we using? Can we use something permeable? And in having those conversations and really digging into the weeds, trust was built on both sides, and it really helped move things forward. And we got to a point where people in the district were willing to say, well, let's give it a try and see how it goes. And that felt like the biggest step for us.
Kara, I want to get back to, in a moment, around a question around the participatory design process. But let me bring in Brad again. Brad, you have been at LAUSD, I think, for 32 years. You look only 36, so you started young. But you've seen LAUSD through a number of highs and lows. And I do want to give a shout out to Superintendent Carvalho for his advocacy out the gate around a school really that deserves acknowledgement. Give the superintendent a round of applause for that. But from a principal's perspective, what would you say to other school administrators, other principals, other folks who have a say in how budgets and things go on campuses? What would you say to them who, if they might be uncertain, might have some hesitancy around greening a school campus? What's your message to them?
Yeah, and I do get those calls. Sunscreen and a broad brimmed hat, by the way. So I'm outside a lot, right? But yeah, 3 things come to mind. So the first is everything that we've done in this realm has been with community partners. So I agree with what both of you are saying, and that trust is important. But now at 2 campuses, the Opeliti Elementary, then Esperanza Elementary, one common thread are the community partnerships, which we're involved with every aspect of this work. The second is, as a school principal, I work for the school district. I consider them my partner in this work. I think this is a really important point. And for a principal who maybe has a pot of money to spend and doesn't know where to begin, I would look for that community partnership. The other part of it is every school has a complex project manager assigned to the school, the CPM. And you want to get the CPM involved right away, because really they're the ones that will guide this work. They will bring in the facilities division. And I have to tell you, I started this work at the Opeliti in 2008, and it has been uniformly positive with the school district, okay? And I have brought them along. I think in my role, I'm an educator, but I'm also educating them to what's possible. And that leads me to the third point, which is to tell your story. Because these stories emerge, and in fact, I think that I was able to accelerate the projects at Esperanza Elementary because we had told our story so well at the Opeliti. It's really important to share those successes and help the school district really understand that this is the right work on our campus.
Principal Rumble, you said something that sort of resonated with me, the storytelling, the narrative, developing that, messaging that, and really, in essence, this panel is about telling the story and amplifying the story of the work. But tell us a little bit of the story around Esperanza, to paint that picture for us, illustrate, who Esperanza is. You've been at Leo Paletti, but tell us a bit about Esperanza. I've had the chance to go to that campus briefly. There's a story embedded in that community that makes this work that you're doing so particularly powerful. So give us a little taste of what that is.
No, absolutely. So we're a school community of about 700 students. We're right between the skyscrapers of downtown Los Angeles and MacArthur Park on Wilshire Boulevard. We are a community of asphalt and concrete. And so if a child is going to experience nature, it will be on that child's campus. 100% of our students live in apartments. They're in those apartments that come across a concrete sidewalk and asphalt street onto an asphalt campus, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I like to say that no child should have to get on a school bus to go on a field trip, say, to MacArthur Park in order to experience nature. Nature needs to be integrated into their day. So just briefly, we are a campus of children who are living under the circumstances of poverty. We are a campus of children of color. We are a campus of grateful, loving parents many of whom have sacrificed much to be in this country. Why? Because they want better opportunities for their children. And central to this is the way that they spend their time on campus. We need to do the best job possible for those students.
Incredibly important work, Brad. I really appreciate you lifting that up. I want to make another plug for folks. As you have questions, write those down on the note cards. We'll be collecting them and bringing those up and posing your question. Let me go back to Kira. And Kira, when we shifted to Brian, I sort of told you that we're coming back to talk a little bit more about the participatory design process. And it feels like it's a good segue to have that question, given what Brad said around sort of the rich sort of community impact and involvement at Esperanza. So talk to us a bit around the participatory design process that comes from Green Schoolyards. What does that look like? What does that entail? Illustrate that picture for us, please.
Well, I want to say it's probably one of the greatest pleasures of my professional life to facilitate participatory design on Schoolyards, because human beings are naturally landscape architects. They want to manipulate their environment, they want to have a say in their spaces, they want to grow things out of the earth. It's very natural, so it's not a difficult job by any means. I think our team does a great job of bringing in resources to make it a little easier, like scaled models of the campus and little model trees and different tools to help bring about the ideas. But the ideas are there. And on most of the campuses we work at, kind of like Brad was alluding to in the school where he works, the communities are very involved and passionate. I mean, the parents are making food on the blacktop. They're throwing festivals, community groups are coming out. So they're already really keyed into the space. They are experts. They know where the potholes are, they know where the water pools, they know which drinking fountain is cooler at the end of the afternoon and which one tastes like it could make tea. So they're keyed in, and it's actually an easy part of our job to pull ideas from them. They know what they want, and they're excited.
Thank you. Alejandra, let me turn to you. You've had a fair amount of involvement in how this work, the sausage making of this work as well. I want you to talk a little bit around some of the successes that you've seen. How's that impacted attendance and community connections to schools? And then paint the picture for us around what does true sort of public-private partnership look like? What is that North Star?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So I think there's been, as Kira mentioned, one of the key, I think, metrics of success has been the trust and the buy-in that this initiative has gotten, not only from school communities, but facilities, departments, and school district staff. I think to me that is, they are part of the engagement, the communication that was done to design the schoolyard, so they are also contributors to that design. I think things that we've seen, it's funny, I was looking at the info sheet that you have on the table, and I was like, oh yeah, that's true. A lot of the things that are there, I saw them firsthand. We haven't done a before and after scientific study, but anecdotally, we know that the kids are more active. I think before the schoolyard transformations, you would see some kids playing basketball, some kids playing soccer on the asphalt, and other kids sitting along the building on the shade, trying to stay cool. And now it's a lot of different activities. There are kids jumping on logs, gardening, doing many different things, and you can definitely see that. Teachers and principals have reported that when the kids come back from recess, they're calmer. There has been less conflict during recess, so they're more ready to learn. And we haven't, the pandemic obviously made things a little hard in terms of measuring enrollment and attendance, but we do hope that eventually we'll do a study to see that, because I can predict that there will be more enrollment and attendance, because I think the joy that you sense in this transformed schoolyards is really palpable and contagious. Oh, and then you asked me about
Public-private partnership.
Okay. So I think as any partnership, I think one of the keys is to start with an agreement that outlines roles and responsibilities, and we did that in 2017, and basically the Trust for Public Land, Green Schoolyards, I might not know, but the Trust for Public Land committed to bring in a lot of resources and deliver the first pilot schoolyard for the district and help with the systems change. And then the district also committed, some staff assigned to the project, and they committed to be participant in this journey. I think without funding from the state, that was another critical part of this, that having funding to actually do the transformations and show that it can be done. So we call those the pilots or the demonstration projects. And I think calling them pilots was a great way of saying, hey, we're testing things. We're like exploring together. If these things don't work, we can change them later, but you're not, not all the schoolyards need to be like this. Let's do 5 together and see how it works. So in addition to the public funding, private funding was critical, because public funding is very restricted in what you can do. And the private funding was necessary for doing all these other things, helping with the facilities master plan, as Kira mentioned, the design guidelines, all those things, we need a flexible funding that could help with that. And now I think the key push is going to be the stewardship. As Brad mentioned, that is critical, and we are figuring it out. The district is committed to figuring it out. There's other organizations that are growing together as one organization that is helping tremendously with maintaining the spaces and doing programming. So I do see there's still a lot of work to do, but there's, we have really gotten over the big hump. There's still, now we need to build a lot of projects, but I think the systems change has been initiated.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for the questions. We have a lot of questions from the audience and doing my best, one, to read through the handwriting. So forgive me if I, take a little bit of time to navigate that. My eyes are not as good as they were when I was in school, so I'm working on that. But a lot of great questions, and so I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. We'll jump around and see what we can do. We'll combine what we need to combine. The first question I think is I'm going to direct to Brad, and then others jump in. But really the question around how do you maintain a green schoolyard? And a couple of questions are specifically asking around sort of the human resource capital that's needed. How are we supporting folks who often go unrecognized that are critical on school campuses, groundskeepers, maintenance, to make sure that this green schoolyards effort can be sustained. So Brad, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, well, very quickly. So we use native plants pretty much exclusively in the areas that we have really improved on our campus. And so for the first year, there can be watering involved. There's irrigation that on top of the soil in our main habitat, which we used for the first year. This was a project done with Los Angeles Audubon Society involving their high school interns teaching our students. And so the watering involved the students as well. But what's funny with the native plants is you don't really need to water much after that. So on much of, we've done about 10,000 square feet of asphalt that have already been removed and replaced with native plants. And so the students will be involved with some hand watering from time to time, and they really love it. Anytime I'm on campus right now, the LA's best students are like, Mr. Rumpel, watering. And they have to understand that it doesn't need that much watering. We had Westwood Presbyterian Church was out on Saturday. It's another community partner. And they removed a lot of the underbrush from a habitat strip we have along Wilshire Boulevard. And so community groups get involved as well. But honestly, I was listening to what you're saying. With the work that we've done, I have a close relationship with the gardeners that serve our campus. But the spaces where the native habitat is, they largely are able to concentrate on other areas.
Kira, Alejandra, anything to add to that? How are you seeing it done in OUSD and other places across the state?
It's not a simple solution, and I think it varies between schools and districts, but we see the stewardship of the spaces as a shared responsibility between, buildings and grounds, facilities, folks, and the school community. And I think, as Brad mentioned, some of the schools have, very clear areas that are, okay, this is the school's outdoor learning space, and it will be maintained by the schools, and then, buildings and grounds maintains other portions, like they mow if there's a grass field, they mow the grass, and they do the bigger, also, the ground needs to be there for bigger repairs, like irrigation line breaks. Not much irrigation is needed, but when you're establishing trees, you do need to water them for at least 3 years. I think fostering that relationship between the stewards of the school and buildings and grounds is also very critical, because then they enjoy working together, and they get the call, hey, my water broke, can you come fix it, and it gets fixed. I think when we started in Oakland, there was no communication. There was a lot of actually going against each other. For example, buildings and grounds decided, got a call on some tree issue, and they would just go cut the trees, so the school wouldn't know. So there was a lot of, lack of communication, and I think that the Green Schoolyard brought the department and the school together. And then there's also the additional huge help is having a nonprofit partner growing together that I'm saying we as the collective, but the Trust White Land got funding to fund one person that is there maybe half time, helping with engaging kids in stewardship and a little bit of the day-to-day maintenance, like weeding and things like that. Kira, anything?
Well, I guess the only other thing I'd add is, we need larger maintenance budgets in schools, and that's something that I think we all know. We need teachers to have higher salaries. We need more money in schools in general. So, our partnership has give everybody a raise. As Ali mentioned, we've been able to get state and private funding and create a maintenance program that is uniquely funded and tailored to our pilot program. But I think when we think about scaling this work across the state, we will just need public dollars that are available for this purpose, and I hope we can all make that happen.
Let's thank you for those answers. Let's keep diving into really some wonderful questions that folks have sent up. Won't get to all of them, but another question is, in LAUSD, a major hurdle is the removal of all asphalt to cool down our playgrounds, to cultivate healthy play spaces. Do you have any tips to make this systemic, removal of asphalt? Who wants to take that?
You probably can talk about systems, but I want to say it's not as difficult as it seems. So, for example, when I arrived at Esperanza, the parking lot for employees ended here, but the asphalt ended here, okay? So I had some money that was left by the previous administration. So we were able to fund for about $7,000 the removal of 122 by 12 feet of asphalt. And that now, we called it the rewilding of Wilshire, and that habitat strip that I previously mentioned, right? It took about $7,000 and we established a hose bib as well. You do need to have the soil tested, but again, it's your complex project manager who works with facilities to guide that along. So in terms of systems, I was really heartened by what board member or Vice President Melvoin said, that I really think at a higher level than the school level, that's where the work needs to happen. So what about some sort of strike force that went campus to campus to really identify where's the low-hanging fruit? Where on this campus can we start to move pretty much immediately to remove asphalt to address a lot of the issues that our keynote speakers talked about?
Before you ask the question or answer the question, another comment slash question is, some of these are trying to strike at the heart of the issue. It's one thing to advocate for moving asphalt, but shouldn't we question the millions of dollars spent on repaving projects? Maybe we ought to leave that there and think about that. I mentioned that.
I was gonna say that I think we're having to remove asphalt because it was built like that in the first place, but hopefully we can line up schoolyard greening with major renovations where you don't have to remove asphalt. So any big projects need to be thinking about not repaving. That would definitely be a good thing to do.
I think the other thing I want to say about systems of removing asphalt is that, desperate times call for desperate measures, and we're all in desperate times. We're really feeling the brunt of the climate crisis, and I think from a state and national level, pretty soon here, we're going to hit a sea change where it is required that we remove asphalt to cool our cities. So, this is such a critical convening of getting people together to push more dominoes, but the writing's on the wall that we just have to do this work actually for our own safety. So good news, bad news, it has to get done.
I think let me turn to another question. I'll try to combine this question that came from a couple of folks. Question, can you open these green schoolyards to kids and community on after school or weekends? Can we label them parks? And then another question raises the issue of, sorry, I'm trying to read it. LA City Department of Recreation and Parks Vision for a Community School Parks and Elementary School campuses, excuse me if I'm butchering the question, is neighborhood school is neighborhood parks. Is this in keeping with educators' vision for the greening of campuses? Brad, I'm coming to you a lot, but Alejandro, Kira,
Yeah, well, I'll start. It really makes perfect sense that the schoolyard be accessible beyond the school hours. And this joint use idea really needs, I think, to become policy. That's my opinion. I've had good luck with that, both at Leo Politi and Esperanza. We have Anna here who served at People for Parks. Some of you probably know about that wonderful organization. Now, LA Neighborhood Land Trust, which is a partner in my new project, is very interested in this as well. But it makes sense to, I thought about writing an op-ed for the LA Times about the open gate, right? I'll tell you quickly that I used to, I was a young principal at Leo Politi and passionate about this. And I'd work till 9 o'clock at night, and I thought, well, I'll leave the gate open. So I would leave it open. We had about 6 core families. The parents would come in, and the moms would play loteria, and the children would play up till 9 o'clock. And I remember Olympic Division was right down the street, and the senior lead officer came up to me and she said, you're changing the crime statistics in this neighborhood, right? And anecdotally, I'll tell you that when I left Leo Politi, those families brought in a mariachi band and gave me a Coast Live Oak, which we trucked over to Esperanza. And it's our friendship tree where children, Claire, go to solve their problems. And it's probably about 12 feet tall now. But there's also, I'm just going to say that I'm not there 24 hours a day at Esperanza. There are folks that know how to get onto campus, maybe 50 to 100 of them, excuse me, that will play soccer in the evening, maybe tonight in summer. I'm showing you my hand and no fingers are up. This shows you how many problems we have had with them, okay? So let's think about that.
Yeah, I think that at least how we approach it, we do believe that schools should be open to the public after hours. However, that was a big barrier challenge for the district to agree to. So what we agreed to is to work together towards that and kind of tailor it however it works, because we didn't want that to be a barrier for doing anything. I think greening the schoolyard is a huge benefit, whether it's open or not. If it's open, it's a much bigger benefit. So I think our first goal was, okay, let's get this done, and then let's have an agreement to work together towards opening after hours. And I think the experience is pretty similar. The people that want to get on the campus, get on the campus. So you might as well open so other people can get in with strollers and other things, because otherwise you have the young people that can jump the fence. So it's, I think that there's the fear of vandalism. I just don't know if it's just a fear or there's been any bad experience. We never heard of anything. So
let me jump into another question. There are a number of questions on this, obviously, but someone just made it plain and simple. Where do we get the money? And so talk about the access to capital that is helping to fuel these projects. Talk about the grants, the bonds, with the state, with the city. Where do we get the money?
I'll start by saying that, as Ellie mentioned, we've had great partners in the state. The California Natural Resources Agency has hugely supported our work, the State Coastal Conservancy, and as well as private funders. But I don't want to dismiss that could be a barrier to some folks, because we're very privileged to have a large team. Our grants manager is here today. We have folks to write these grants and get this money. So partnerships like that with outside organizations able to come in and help bridge the gap and bring funding to schools is is critical, aside from getting more money into schools. But I do think, and I don't want to overstate this, but the climate crisis is coming, and there's going to be state funds available to mitigate that. And so if we're all making the case that green schoolyards make schools climate resiliency centers, we can get those fundings put into schools.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, just quickly, just want to mention that at both schools, there is, through U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a federal program called Schoolyard Restoration Program. They don't call it a grant because they don't think it should be a one-shot deal. And it provides some seed money. It could be like $8,000, but it draws in federal dollars. We had a local nonprofit, Los Angeles Audubon Society, that carried that grant. But I think that's a really good opportunity. And I'll just quickly tell you, very excited to tell you this, that Los Angeles Neighborhood Land Trust did write a grant for $1.48 million. That's what the award was from California Natural Resources Agency, and that we really want to show what's possible in downtown Los Angeles. So that project is underway right now. And there's always an anecdote with the principal, but it was a virtual site visit. And so who better to tell the story than 5 students? So we were on Zoom with Sacramento. But I literally, school's closed, I did like a 10-minute Zoom with the teacher and 5 students, 5th grade, and said, we noodled some thoughts about, what has it meant to you before school closed? What did all of this nature on campus mean for you? And one child talked about biodiversity and that she will be an ornithologist. That's Yanni, and she will be, remember her name? And each of them took a different angle. And I know we got the largest grant in the county of Los Angeles. And I know it's because of those students and their authentic words.
We have about, thank you, Brad. We have about 10 minutes. I want to do a bit of a lightning round before we get to a closing question. So there's a question around equitable access to resources, sort of building on this question of how do we get the money. And one person sort of notes that there's a particular grant that requires partnership with a landscape architect, and it questions how can that be an equitable process for schools that don't have the resources to get enter into that partnership with a landscape architect or whomever. So talk about sort of the equity aspect of this. How do we make this equitable for schools like at Esperanza, like other schools in the district across the state, to be able to access resources in the same way as other schools?
Well, one thing that we've done in our partnership is we're very critical about the process by which we choose a school to work with. And we work with the district to establish those kinds of metrics to make sure that we're choosing schools in an equitable way. So that schools that really need a green schoolyard, schools that are in urban heat islands, schools that don't have shade canopy, schools that have a high number of students and families that are suffering from poverty, they're going to be first in line to get those resources. So that way when funding comes from the state or from whatever source, they're already in line to receive those resources. So I think that's one critical piece, is making sure there is a lens, and it's not just green schoolyards are important for everyone. They are, but they are critical in certain neighborhoods, and we're really prioritizing that work where it counts.
Another question, sort of jumping around a bit, really interesting question, more theoretical. What role do living schoolyards play in supporting a culture shift away from competition to cooperation? Really thought-provoking question. Let's take that first.
I'm sort of melting as I hear that question. So, well, actually, I just have to say, we wrote a blog for Natural History Museum that's online now, and it's kickball, soccer, birding. So you can look for that. But it's some students talking about their birding. So we still have competition in kickball, okay? But I'll go back to what I originally said, that when children are out, when they have the choice on their campus to just go out into a habitat or into these areas that are natural, right? those conversations develop. It's incidental learning, it's academic conversation, but they're getting to know one another, they're building that trust among one another. And indeed, it completely informs the culture of the school. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Lightning round, as I said. Can we, who wants to take this? How can Schoolyards support climate resiliency through stormwater management? You touched on that a little bit, but who wants to take that question and unpack it a little bit more?
I mean, there's a huge opportunity. If you look at the 130,000 acres that the California public schools cover, you can have a huge impact on climate. Imagine by removing asphalt, you allow water to infiltrate into the ground. Even if you are not doing bioswales or anything major, just by increasing the infiltration of that site is huge. And again, trees and shade, the impact you can have on temperature, on air, addressing air pollution. So this is a watershed moment, no pun intended. And I think we definitely need to seize it, and it's so refreshing to see that everyone at the state level, all the way from the state level to the schools are excited about seeing this change.
Thank you. I think one more question before we go to our final question. And I'll broaden this question just a bit. It's specific to LASD, but I want to broaden it to statewide. How can we get plenty of shade? Summer's coming. See it, we feel it. How can we get plenty of shade as quickly as possible on school campuses and watch trees, vines, and natives survive on campuses until, we talked about a little bit earlier, asphalt removal is approved? And talk a little bit about that.
Well, one barrier that I'll mention is, we work with the Division of State Architects to get approval for these processes, and bless their hearts, they have the safety of the children in mind when they make very stringent requirements for putting any overhead structure on a school campus. So we do need to continue working on our advocacy at the state level to make that process easier and less expensive to get shade structures built immediately. Our preference is fast-growing trees because they have so many other benefits, but as an immediate kind of climate resiliency safety guideline, we do need shade structures.
Anyone else want to answer that? So we are at the end of our time. I know our panelists, I think, will be around for the rest of this conference, and there's still more questions that we could have asked, but I hope that our panelists will take them and come up to them and talk to them. They are the experts for this. I have a closing question that I want to ask each of you. And it's, one of my favorite quotes, and quote, a part of the quote, excuse me, comes from Dr. Crean. It talks about where do we go from here. And the end of that is, well, chaos our community. I just love what it poses directly. And so the question to you all is, where do we go from here? And while many things need to fall into place to make green schoolyards that are open to the public work, what are the one or two things that you think are needed to really make this work, and action steps that this audience can take as they exit out of this conference at the end of the day and go do the work in communities? Is that Alejandro?
Well, I think a lot of you are already doing what is to be done, which is being here, talking, and learning from each other, and kind of really growing the movement. I think that advocacy is critical. There's still a bunch of things that need to be done in order to go to scale and do it across California, LA, which is, some things require some policy alignment at the state level. And Andrea Breeze mentioned that they're already working on that to make sure that all the policies support this work. And here I've touched a little bit upon, some of the barriers at the state level in terms of getting the permits and for certain things, which it's a great process to ensure that everything is built and designed in a safe and accessible manner, but how can we maybe allow for tree planting to be done quicker? I think that, well, in addition to the advocacy and being together, I think that developing the trust, as Kira mentioned, to me, I think we're on this together, and there's so much work to do that we all have to go in the same direction. So I feel like, developing a really a great trust between partners and with the LA Unified School District is critical to do this work.
Thank you. I want to have Kira go next, and Brad, I want you to close this out.
Sure. I think what inspires me about Green Schoolyards, and probably all of you as well, is the multiple benefits and the fact that they have so many different angles of support, right? They benefit children's health, learning, they benefit the stormwater systems, they benefit biodiversity, which means that we have partners in every sphere, right? And so to me, I just think at this moment, it's critical to get backing from all of those different areas. So if you know someone who's passionate about air quality, are they passionate about Green Schoolyards? If you know someone who's passionate about birds, are they up on Green Schoolyards, right? If you know someone who's really interested in literacy among our youth, are they fighting for Green Schoolyards? So I think once we get everybody at the table, it'll just be this huge sea change that'll move the needle.
Yeah, and I will stick around. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And just a nod to the California Floristic Province. And I sit on the City of Los Angeles Biodiversity Expert Council, and just have to say, this work has a direct impact on local biodiversity. And when local flora and fauna flourish, so do we. So what comes up for me as you ask that question is this moment right now, this moment, but then also this moment with Superintendent Carvalho in this school district, who we have the Division of Instruction, we have the Facilities Division. He supervises all of that, and we have a school board very interested in this as well. So let's take this moment and turn it into policy. Imagine a patchwork quilt of every school in the city having, the district, I should say, having this kind of work happening on every campus. What that will do for local species and for us. It's a win-win. It's this moment.
Let's just give another huge round of applause for our amazing panelists, Kira, Brad, and Alejandra. And thank you to all of you for your questions.
Robert Ogilvy, who is founder of Ogilvy Labs, which is a consulting firm that works to help people build neighborhoods and institutions to create more prosperous and equitable environments. He was previously with Change Lab Solutions, which is a major public health policy firm in the Bay Area, who is by the concept that gave birth to the community school parks model that we've been talking about today and that we're going to continue talking about. And while he was there, even though it's a Bay Area-based firm, he actually came down to LA quite a bit with the Prevention Institute to create a shared use toolkit. So he has a wealth of experience and expertise on this, and we are so excited that he is going to be leading this wonderful discussion on tools and strategies.
Great, thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Really, really nice to be here with a bunch of real people in a real room with real back and forth and emotion and people talking, and it's awesome. I actually wouldn't mind if we kept that open just for some ventilation. How are people doing in the back with the ventilation? Is it okay? Yeah, let's keep the doors open. So I'm Robert Ogilvy. A little bit about myself, and then we have an awesome panel. We're going to take an hour. I know we're running a little bit late, but we've got a lot of genius and expertise up here that I want you guys to hear from. We're going to engage in conversation. And just like the last panel, we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear a lot, actually, from you you all to ask us questions. And there are a couple of these still on your table, so please fill them out and raise your hand when they're filled, and they'll get collected and brought up to you. So when I was a young boy, my family moved to Toronto from Kingston, Jamaica, and my mother was a big believer. My mother's a teacher. Big believer that all 4 of her children would grow up knowing how to do a whole bunch of things. And one of the things she wanted to make sure we all knew how to do was swim. And so I learned how to swim. I became a lifeguard. I became a swimming instructor, all in Toronto Parks and Recreation in high school pools. So it was Parks and Recreation programs that were run out of high school pools. I didn't think there was anything unusual about that. My first actual paycheck came from Parks and Recreation, and for 4 years I taught swimming and I lifeguarded in a series of high school pools in suburban Toronto. Went to college, went to graduate school, moved to the Bay Area, taught at Cal, started teaching at Change Lab, started doing work to all over the state and all over the country to help build healthy communities. And pretty early on, people said to us, Robert, we've got school facilities in our neighborhood that we can't get access to. What can we do about that? And I thought, it just makes sense. Isn't that what we heard today? This just makes so much sense. But there were obstacles that needed to be overcome. So we wrote the first toolkit in California for how to open access to schoolyards after hours in 2010, and started doing a lot of trainings. And I have to give a big shout out to LAUSD. LAUSD was very reluctant to engage in this work in 2010, 2011, 2012, and to hear what has gone on in the intervening 10 years is incredibly inspiring. So I want to give you guys a lot more inspiration today from the people who are actually on the ground doing the work. Just because something makes sense, just because there's a lot of opportunity, just because there's a lot of need, doesn't necessarily mean that an institution is going to automatically respond. What we're going to learn from today is people who have made institutions respond by paying attention to the details and by crafting agreements and partnerships with those agreements that are good for them and good for the institution who they're working with. So immediately to my left is Cora Watkins. Cora is the director of the Community School Initiative. Cora is a teacher. She's got a certification in bilingual teaching, a master's degree in education and administrative credentials, and she's successfully served as a school site principal for 23 years at 3 different schools in Southeast Los Angeles. Her focus is now upon creating a school culture where capacity building, access, equity, and success for all is valued above all else. And for the last 2 years, she's been entirely submersed in and committed to the development of the Community Schools Initiative in Los Angeles. So we're going to hear from her. We're then also going to hear from Ryan. Ryan is to her left. Ryan is with LA Department of Rec and Park, and he's the Government Affairs Director, where he has served as liaison to City Council, Mayor, and other governmental agencies, and has worked on park policies and initiatives, including the Community School Parks Program. To Ryan's left is Julie Brooks. Julie is the Chief Executive Officer of Woodcraft Rangers. Currently, she oversees their service to nearly 15,000 young people every year in LA County at 90 schools, including 48 at LAUSD through after-school enrichment, summer learning, outdoor ed programs. Incredible work. And to Julie's left and is Jimmy Kim. Jimmy is Assistant GM for LA Department of Rec and Park. He began his career in Rec and Park in '95, has come up through the ranks, and he oversees the Recreational Services branch, which includes all recreation programming as well as aquatics Near and dear to my heart, and emergency management. So, get ready those questions as soon as you're ready. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to bring this, and I'm going to sit down. Oh, Jimmy's just been promoted to general manager. So, good work. See where you can get in aquatics. That's awesome. We love it. So we have heard about the effects on student and resident health and wellness. We've heard about how green and open schoolyards. Can you guys see? Should I move this aside? Or can you all see over here? You okay? All the positive effects that those can have on communities. And so I want to start with Cora and ask Cora, I probably might just stand up, to describe the community schools model and how might green and accessible schoolyards fit into that.
Good morning. Community Schools Initiative in Los Angeles Unified has a couple of diverse prongs to it. Community schooling has been around since the days of John Dewey and way before our time. But as someone else mentioned earlier, they resurface about every 10, 15 years, largely in part to a crisis. And as one of the speakers before us, before this panel said, this has been a time of a lot of reckoning and awakening to social social injustices around the world, and particularly here in the U.S. and again, particularly in Los Angeles. So our initiative is in response to that, and also committed to being around for a long time, making this a sustainable effort in California. And with the help of our governor and our president, we are now in receipt of about $50 million that we have applied for and been awarded just for expanding our efforts in Los Angeles. So we have 34 schools right now who join our initiative from a bottom-up, grassroots, community initiated in many cases. That's how they join us. It's a democratic process. We don't choose them. They choose to be part of community schooling, much like what you heard earlier about the strength of community-based decision-making. We have 4 pillars, which provide our foundational resting point and determine what work we'll engage in. So we have expanded and enhanced learning opportunities. We have collaborative leadership and practices. The expanded role of community, parents, family is one of the pillars, as is integrated student supports and services. And if you think about the introductory remarks by Marcy and Claire, everything about SEL, that's what that pillar is about, and providing partnerships and relationships that will build SEL for our students. The work of our community schools now and into the future, hopefully the long future, will be creating schools that are literally hubs of the community. And this comes from the belief that learning doesn't happen just inside of school, or inside of 4 walls, or even inside of those 8-foot chain link fences. Learning occurs inside, outside, and around schools, and we have to become a bigger listener and actor upon what community says and needs. So using a 2-generational approach where we're trying to benefit not just the students we serve that are school age from cradle to college, but also looking at how do we benefit what their parents and families need. If we can address what parents and families and caregivers need simultaneously with addressing the needs of students in their academic and their health and social emotional wellness, then we can uplift the entire community. We can reduce the amount of students who have to move and be transient or who are experiencing home and food insecurities and therefore cannot focus on learning. All of these factors have to come together, and that's what the Community School Initiative is about, and that's where we see a great ability to partner with this coalition and be kind of an umbrella initiative that shares in common what so many of you do. I know Lane is here today, and Reclaim Our Schools LA, who are part of our great partners, and the City of Los Angeles, County of Los Angeles, Department of Mental Health, and Department of County Mental Health. There's just so many things to do for the kids in LA, and that's what we want to do. Join together, unite with what your passions are, and see how we best serve the communities that so often are not listened to.
Thank you, Cora. Julie, I'm going to skip to you and ask you please to describe Woodcraft Rangers and what roles do the after-school partners like yourself play in activating within schoolyards and how you can help meet staffing challenges when these spaces are made available.
Sure. Thank you, Cora. Those words are beautiful, right? So we are one of those community partners that Cora mentions. It does truly take a village, right, to care for the holistic, whole child needs of those individual children and also their families and communities. So Woodcraft Rangers has been a partner. Currently we serve 90 schools throughout LA County. 48 of those are within the Los Angeles Unified School District. We've been partners with the Los Angeles Unified School District for many, many decades, in addition to other partners throughout. Our expanded learning programs, right, so expanded learning encompasses after school, summer programs, so we are on site at 45 of those schools running summer programs this year, 26 of which are in LAUSD. We are also, though, what's interesting about Woodcraft Rangers is we're celebrating our 100th anniversary as an actual organization, providing 100 years of outdoor education. With a history of providing outdoor education to young people who would not otherwise have had those opportunities for a variety of reasons. So we sit at an interesting intersection. I think that after school and expanded learning providers provide insight. We have deep trust and community capital that can be leveraged with the school district. We curate each of our programs to meet the specific needs of students, families, and school administrators to ensure that we are serving, so each of our programs look different, right? Each of our programs look different. But we also inhabit the school at those times of out-of-school time hours, right? Where we can bring in, right? Our programs often bring in additional community partners to provide services that are not our specialties, to provide a holistic, robust array of services in those out-of-school time. We're not alone, right? We serve many schools in LAUSD, but many of the expanded learning programs are provided by the Beyond the Bell branch internally or other community partners as well. But we do provide, as a community-based organization in the expanded learning space, we provide, I think we bring up trust with administrators too, where we are already on campus so that we can be a connector and network hub, right? So we can serve as that operational hub to bring in additional resources. So when it comes to living schoolyards, right, when you think about things like maintaining these, I've heard people talk about maintaining or activating, right? Activating these spaces, programming these spaces. Expanded learning providers like Woodcraft Rangers can do that, right? Can do that. I think
the principal from Esperanza earlier mentioned LA's Best, which is also an after-school provider in Los Angeles Unified School District, and their kids, participating in those community gardens. We have many of those programs too. So we're already on site with the trust of families, students, and the school district to be able to activate some of these spaces.
This is for either Julie or Cora. I'll ask you this, and then we'll get to Parks and Rec. So as you do this work, you've created shared use agreements with the school district, and in your case with others as well. And I'd like to hear from you, please, about what have been some of the challenges, and what have been some of the sort of common misconceptions that you've had to deal with and you've had to address in order to make your program successful and to last.
Happy to, right? So I would say, so some of the challenges, I think part of this is about a mindset shift into what the facilities are used for, right? So we've heard that already over and over echoed today, just kind of shifting an understanding of how to utilize spaces, of sharing those spaces with the community. So we work daily with, of course, the principals here for a long time. We work daily with school administrators at every one of our sites to talk through facilities issues. That's a lot of what that partnership, is. Without the use of space, we don't have a program, right? So I think building trust with administrators is really, really key. I also think that understanding how the channels and mechanisms of a district or a system works so that we can work within it. We're now actually just discussing a little hiccup that we're working through right now, hopefully. But understanding how those happen because I think, a system can be challenging, but the individuals within it are all committed to the same purpose and the same mission. So finding those avenues so that you can work within the mechanisms that exist and understand the channels to make that happen. And in a system like LAUSD, that can be complex, right? So I'll start there.
Complex is an understatement. For all of you who try to knock on our doors and feel like we're not listening, apologies on behalf of the district. We do want to listen, and collaboration builds at the speed of trust. Trust builds at the speed of relationships. So really say to everybody in the room, keep building the relationships, memorandums of understanding and other systems, structures that LA Unified has in place. They're there for a wonderful reason. They are there to protect our kids. But with relationships, we can find ways to work around, through, and with the system. And it is doable, but that communication factor is extremely critical to making it all happen. With regards to what Julie said about their longevity in Los Angeles Unified, I started working with Woodcraft Rangers in 1990, more or less, as a site administrator. And that program still exists at that school 30 years later, again, because of relationships. So if nothing else resonates, hopefully the idea of keep working the relationship and don't give up, because LA Unified wants you, LA Unified needs you. LA Unified sometimes just doesn't know how to let you in the door, but when we have the relationships, we can open the doors together.
That's great. So let's refresh. Collaboration builds at the speed of trust. Trust builds at the speed of relationships. I'm going to remember that one. That's a great one. Over to Rec and Parks, Jimmy or Ryan, I'm going to let you guys decide how to respond or who to respond. I'd love to hear about the Community School Parks program, including some recent updates about so tell us about that, please.
Hi. I'll start and then I'll pass it over to my new boss. I'll have to do a good job. And talk about the updates. The first thing I wanted to say to this group is that it can be done. There's some elements of what that is that can be done, but it can be done. And we're proof of it. Woodcraft Region is proof of it. City of Los Angeles, Redmond Parks, we're proof of that. It takes a lot of work, but it can be done. If there's a need, and there's ability to fill that need, it can be done. Sometimes communicating that need gets a little troublesome, but our relationship with LAUSD is good. We've had agreements with LAUSD dating back to the 70s. And I'm going to harken back to what Jimmy and our host, about being lifeguards. But our pool agreements with LAUSD has been great. There's a need for pools in the city. We have the ability to staff them. We have some facilities that are able to be used by community members and students and vice versa. So I want to dispel any myths out there that says this cannot be done. It can be done. It has been done. It's being done. Okay, let me talk about community school parks. And I want to give you a picture of why the city of Los Angeles wanted to do this. We are, as a park system, we're judged by a metric of how close you are to a park, how close you live to a park, right? We've all heard 10-minute walk, right? It's changed throughout the years, but for the most part, if we can walk to a park, it's a signal that we have a healthy community and we're able to experience open space, and it's a good indication of a community that has access and has resources to be able to do that. The element that I want to bring up now is leadership towards what are we going to do about that. I think currently we're at 65% of Angelenos living within 10-minute walk, according to Transfer Public Land. About 8 years ago, we were somewhere around 45%. Okay? So it's a good shift. The mayor of Los Angeles put in the sustainability plan that we need to get to 75%, I believe, by 2035, 65% by 2025, 75% by 2035, and 100% by 2050. So when you look at a parks department like us, the way we have access to parks is we build them. Land is expensive. Parks take a long time to build. So what we did was we looked at a model that is not new. We looked at a model that was actually pretty successful and said, hey, LAUSD, you actually have land in areas where we can use as parks. Makes sense, right? It makes absolute sense. And to all of you, it makes absolute sense. To the 7-year-old me who climbed fences to play baseball at Atwater Elementary School, made a lot of sense. Okay? Green field, baseball bat, I'm gonna get there. So that leadership needs something else. It needed money. And so the mayor put in our budget the seed money to start a community school parks program with an LAUSD. And then came the work. So the community school parks program is basically filling in that part, but after school programs, it's Monday through Friday. We didn't want to interfere with that. We said, we'll take the weekends, right? We'll talk to LAUSD principals, we'll take the weekends, we'll pilot this at 4 elementary schools and see where it goes. We just needed to try. And we needed the leadership of both the department's leadership, our board's leadership, the mayor's leadership, and then we needed some kind of money to say, we're coming to LAUSD, not just saying, hey, you got another thing to do, right? We didn't want to just go in there and say, hey, principals, here we are, we're going to offer some stuff. What we really wanted to do is, the last element that I'm going to share with you is say yes. We said yes to everything. I went and cold called principals, I sat in principals' rooms with them. They asked all the questions they could possibly ask about who's going to pay for this in 500 different ways. And we said, we will do it. We just want to pilot it. Do you want in? And it's very hard because, as you said, trust it takes time to do that. So there's this guy here offering this program. wasn't it for me? And really that is what philosophically what we want to tackle. We want this to exist where benefits go both ways. That's why I work with pools. Because pools are hard to find, they're hard to build, right? We had the pools or they had the pools, the need was there. So we're going to try to shift that mindset towards schoolyards. We started 4. Leo Polito is one of them. If Brad Rumble's still here, I want to meet you because I want to shake your hand. Leo Polito is one of our schools. We have 75th Street Elementary, I believe, Cahuenga Elementary, and Harvard Elementary. And what we did was we basically hired folks to open gates, close gates, make sure that kids are safe, they had something to play with. And then the last thing I'm going to end with, and I'm going to pass it on to Jimmy, is we fell a little short in the sense that we opened the schoolyards thinking that people will come, right? And then we realized really quickly, especially during the summer, those schoolyards are hot. Okay? So we needed to expand kind of our vision of what that looks like. I won't talk about COVID that much because, kind of stalled our momentum a little bit, but we'll keep it there. But fast forward, and I want to introduce our general manager, our new appointed general manager, Kim, who actually, before that was assistant general manager of recreation. And he basically said, we're going to take this program and do what we did. Take it away, Jimmy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I want to first frame this by saying that when we first piloted the community schools parks, Cahuenga Elementary School was walking distance from my nephew's house, and so I had the opportunity to visit and participate in the programming there. And one of the lessons that I learned during that time, and this was before COVID, so I was in a different capacity. And I remember talking to Ryan about how, when we got there, literally it was somebody that opened the gate, gave my sons, I have 3 young ones at home, and my nephew a basketball or a football to play with. There wasn't very much program activities. And so I know as part of the conversations, we're also talking about greening our schools as well. And the point of that is that if you're greening the space, that's an amazing thing, but what do you do with that? And so one of the things that as we formalized our plan through our Board of Commissioners and moving this forward, we have committed to make sure that every one of the community school parks that we implement, we will have programming from when the gates open to when the gates close. So it wouldn't, they'll have access to, the basketballs and, all those other things, but we will actually program the park or the community school park to have classes, whether it be basketball, whether it be handball, squash, whatever that is, we are committed to doing that. And we are in this pivotal moment in the city where just in 2018, the mayor of Los Angeles negotiated $160 million to bring low-cost, equitable programming into our park systems. And so by default, we're going to use some of that funding to bring programming into the community school parks. So what does that look like for us? So as Ryan said, in the next 3 years, we broke it out into 3 phases, and we're being very aggressive in terms of how we're doing this. So this coming fall, our goal is to open 5 community school parks, and then in the spring, to add another 5. So we'll have 10 community school parks within this fiscal year, and then every fiscal year after that, we'll add additional 10. And each of these facilities, again, one of the lessons learned from our initial pilot was that we only have 1 staff there. But this time around, we're actually going to put a manager, so to speak, to be the lead person. That person will be engaging the principals, the communities, putting together programming, and then we'll also add another staff member to help and make sure that we have programming going on at these facilities. Another thing that we're going to do that we did during our pilot that we're going to continue to do is we're going to use our mobile recreation vans. So we have 4 mobile recreation vans that went around to each of these community school parks and gave very specialized programming. And so we will continue that. And the goal is so that they become, I think one of Cora said that the schools can be the hub, right? The community hubs. Well, that's what our parks serve. They serve as community hubs. So we want to turn these community school parks into those hubs. And we believe the way to do that is by making sure that there's programming, good quality program where the community members can walk to these facilities and participate in that. So that has been memorialized in our strategic plan. It's part of our the mayor's equity plan. Just this past year, he did create an executive directive, and as part of that executive directive is to provide equitable park access to Angelinos. And as part of that, we have formalized this plan so that now we have to do it. It's not hey, let's just talk about it. Now we're committed. So that is our commitment to move this forward. Let me follow up. So in the first session, we heard a lot about maintenance and the importance of that and how that is, an ongoing issue. I want to talk now about how city programming, specifically the community school parks program, and what role that can play in helping the district and community-based organizations overcome staffing and liability challenges. And I want to talk about that because those are real, especially the liability challenge. So if you guys can address that, I'd appreciate it.
So one of the advantages of being part of a large organization, the city of Los Angeles and Recreation and Parks, is the resources that we have to work with attorneys on fixing some of those liability challenges. And that's really where a lot of the work comes in, especially when it comes to calming the nerves of both sides, like what happens when these extreme kind of events happen. And I think there's a hump that we overcame when we did say yes, because we actually do shared liability when it comes to community school parks. So when we open our gates for that weekend, whatever those hours are, we're sort of the liable partner, so if something were to happen there. So it probably takes further conversation, but it is something that we had to figure out, and so maybe put a pin on that in terms of, okay, what does shared liability look like? Is it from these hours? Does it look different later on? Could be for further discussion. And then when it comes to the cost of like maintenance and operations, right? I think that's a big topic to say, if we build this, what happens after you use it? Who gets to maintain it? Is there shared maintenance, right? And I think that's kind of the legwork that we as partners need to tackle. Because it comes down to money, but it comes down to will as well. Yes, when you talk about putting money where your mouth is, we have some of that. We don't have a lot of it, we have some of that. But it takes the will to be able to say, okay, what does this actually look like? What does shared liability look like? Are we able to do this? Are we able to use grant funds from this to be able to do this, right? And that's where really the conversation is. That's where we're paying attention. That's where you guys come in actually, to pay attention to what's available out there. There may be some measures out there that could be used for some things that we never thought could be used for. So for us, did we tackle that portion of it? We sort of did. We have the liability during the times we're open. We have staff members to make sure that areas are clean. We pay for additional maintenance, and we pay for our bills, like water and electricity if we ever use it. It's a standard thing. We said yes to everything. So there's that hump. And now the other part of the question is, well, what about CDOs, right? What about folks who just want to do this and don't have the ability to have that kind of like $1 million insurance or whatever it may be. So that, to me, and I've said this to some folks in the past, I think that's our next step. How do we make this program available to CBOs who say, we want to do this, we just don't have this part, right? We want to apply for a use of the school grounds, we just don't have this part. Can the city help? And I think that's something that we're open to discussing. I don't know quite, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know quite yet what that looks like, but hey, if we were able to get this far, and if we're saying yes, and the will is there, my hope and you know, with your help, we can figure it out. But that's our next step in this, is how to help CBOs, because we can't do it all. So that's where I'll stop.
Great, thanks. We've got some questions. I'm going to get to them in a second. But I just want to hear from each of you.
Do you mind if I address staffing for a second?
Go right ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, that is very
I think staffing is so key to talk about right now. Every industry is struggling to find folks to do the work. But staffing right now, I think this is where community-based organizations can really help both the district and the city to make these things happen. At Woodcraft Rangers, we have a hyper-local staffing strategy. We make sure that we employ folks from a 3-mile radius around a school, right? So we are employing from the communities that we serve, which is important when it comes to economic viability of those communities. It's important when it comes to representation for those students. But also, right, we have a nimbleness as a community-based organization that systems may not have, right? So when schools reopened in spring of 2021, we helped to reopen 58 LAUSD schools by serving as a partner from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We hired 400 people in 3 weeks. We did it again when we were asked to do summer programs last summer. We did it again this spring. So I just, right now, I think your community-based organizations are real assets to be able to find folks in the community that can be credible messengers and really, really engaged staff in these projects. And we can work across systems. One of the things that we're doing with other school districts is even creating hybrid positions where folks may have assignments during the school day and then work with us in the afternoon, creating full-time benefited positions where people stay longer and are better jobs for folks, right? So, because we also are experiencing chronic underemployment in many of these positions as well. So I just want to say that when there is a will and we can work across systems, I think there's a real opportunity to provide folks with more economic stability, with greater opportunity, and then greater continuity for these communities.
Great. You know, I was going to ask a closing question to everyone, but 3 of you have already jumped the gun and answered it, which is really, what are some of the next steps that need to be taken to bring this work to scale? So Clara, I'm going to put that one to you. We've heard from Park and Rec, and we've heard from Woodcraft Rangers. I want to hear from you what you think some of the sort of critical next steps or pinch points, you know, that need to be overcome to take this work to scale.
Definitely a complex issue, but I think the very first piece of it is building relationships, as I already said, but second to that is we need support at a local, a state, a federal level. Some of the great barriers that we as a district encounter are largely based on laws or policies that may have been a good idea at some point, but don't work with the new collaborative atmosphere that we're living in. We have to do a better job, in particular, of braiding funding. So if there's, for example, a 21st Century Learning Grant that is largely, is hugely important to many CBOs, such as Woodcraft Rangers, and then we have a California Community School Partnership Program grant. How do we work together to braid funding so that we make sure that all schools in one initiative have the ability to tap into the other? How do we work on things like no-cost MOUs that would allow the city and the school district to work together with waiving some of the fees for the traditional usage of a school facility. Our relationships have to be reciprocal. If I can't benefit Woodcraft Rangers, if I can't benefit the city, if the city and Woodcraft Rangers can't benefit me, we don't have that motivation sometimes to stay in it for the long relationship, the long building. So we've got to find ways to utilize each other for letters of support, for being able to list each other as mutual or matching funding opportunities. So I think really looking at how do we break down some of the big things at a systems level that interfere with our day-to-day functioning, like our insurance, all of those, what may feel mundane when you're talking about saving the planet, but yet if we don't break through the mundane, we're not going to get to the important work of saving the planet and educating all children equally and equitably. So let's break through the barriers through the systems, but then also look at how we can work in non-traditional ways to support the work of each other and reciprocate at every step possible.
Excellent. So we've got a lot of questions here. I'm going to ask a bunch of them, and I'm going to ask for relatively brief answers. Quick, what other countries have green schoolyard models, and how are we trying to follow their example? What other countries have green schoolyards, and I should say, have we learned from them, or are there any examples that we're trying to follow? Yeah. Well, there's an R in here, but if you want to ignore the R and go for counties, I'm happy to, let's just go with that. Yeah, I'm a flexible.
It's not that I have an answer for counties either, but
fine.
Yeah. I don't know about green schoolyard models, but I don't really know other countries that have other green schoolyard model. I imagine there's probably some.
Well, if some of you do, you can talk to them afterward. At an interactive session unplanned afterward, I saw 2 hands very quickly go up, so I'll give you the opportunity for that. For schools and parks, how are you handling disability access and programming as part of the work?
Well, I think as we, at least as we identify these locations, just in general in our parks program, all of our programs are reasonable accommodation, and we're also ensuring that the programs we offer is offered on all abilities. So as part of the programming that we put into our community school parks, we will also have what we call adaptive programming. We just created a adaptive sports program section within the department to leverage them to bring in adaptive type programming so that's inclusive to students of all abilities. So that's kind of what we're doing.
The questions are pouring in here.
I just want to say, Beyond the Bells model is egalitarian by nature, so the after-school programs, every child participates. There's no tryouts, it's a sampling model. But I would also say, as Woodcraft Rangers, we work closely with other public entities like the Lanterman Regional Center to devise trainings for staff, as well as strategies, not only for physical accommodation, but also for families with neurodiverse children.
So the answer to the first question apparently is Canada and Finland. The answer just came up. So there we go. Has Parks and Rec considered including health services in community schools park programming, i.e. mobile, dental, health clinics, health education, etc.?
Absolutely. I think, the conversation of how do we include the CBOs into our programming, we do that in parks already. So how do we take that model and we figured out a way, right, to work with CBOs, to work with health organizations. I mean, all through, and I'll bring up COVID, but all through COVID, our parks were locations where people could come and get their, vaccinations, get their health checkups. So we've already done that in the parks. So how do we take that model, and as we get into the school systems, how do we provide them that liability coverage, right? Because that's an important piece. I already kind of have an idea of how we could do that. I'll just say it here, very often, we could register them as volunteers and then have them be parks volunteers as part of our program. They will be covered under our liability, and they could go in and do the programs that we can offer, right? Because we also all know, like in recreation, we have to deal with unions as well. So I talk with unions all the time. And we don't want to work the unions out of their job because they're very important. So, but there's things that we can't do. And so how do we do that? And so one of the solutions to how do we work with CBOs that want to come into the schools is, well, let's get them under our umbrella and then utilize them to have those programs in our facilities. So the simple answer is yes. Yes.
Here's more about politics. This is silly. Primary elections just passed with support for several progressive candidates that value community and restorative justice. How can we leverage their power to gain more support policies to speed up the process of greening schools? This is to anybody. Government affairs, civil-based organizations, or anyone can take this.
Okay, get your ducks in a row. What that means is, with new energy and new leaders out there, elected leaders, get your ducks in a row because they're going to have to listen to somebody. And they're going to have to listen to somebody who's been there, done that, but can prove it. So getting your ducks in a row means getting your data together, working with other organizations to get why this works, or maybe why it doesn't. So new leadership means they're going to have to listen to somebody, and it's probably good to have something packaged for them to look at. But it's also a good opportunity, right? So my best advice to all of us is to really get our ducks in a row. Why does it work? Because the numbers says it works. And I think there's enough heads in here and the work that we do to put that best foot forward to say to a new elected or a new body to say, we need this, we want this, we need your support, not just on paper, we need the money, right? And that's how we're going to get through this. Progressive or not, I think the need is definitely there, and we need to fill it.
We've got a number of questions about what, the lawns, when are LA's parks going to go native, native grasses, we've got drought and we're watering lawns. So I'm going to ask this one, which is related to it, which is, do you think policy change is possible regarding rules and regs that prevent or slow down the changing and transformation of schoolyards? Specifically related to guidelines that favor asphalt, we heard about that in Oakland as well, and prevent removal of prior equipment. Can we do this work without policy change, or is policy change really what's necessary? Take anyone want to come at this one.
I think policy change is necessary in terms of making it not less stringent. For example, with asphalt, there's always a concern about arsenic levels. So there are legitimate reasons why some people have greater concerns about removal of asphalt. Not that anyone is doubting that a living schoolyard would be a more beautiful space, would be a more healthy space, but we do have to face the realities of some of the horrible situations that we've caused. We made asphalt a certain way, now we're suffering the consequence of trying to remove that asphalt. So what are the policy changes, what are the funding streams that can be utilized to remove carcinogenics from our school sites, and how do we work on containment, abatement, all of those issues so that we can get to the process of greening in a quicker way. and in a healthier way. If we wait and remove 1 cubic yard of asphalt a year at a school, we'll be doing this a lot longer than I'm going to be alive. So how can we move a little bit more quickly, and how can we affect change and give incentives to districts, for example, that take a bigger step in the initiative? For many, many years, and the reason, believe it or not, LA Unified did have grass at schools 150,000 years ago when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. But because of the expense of maintaining those environments, they became asphalt, because you don't need to mow or water asphalt. So if we could incentivize from the federal level this creation of more quick abatement, removal, and resurfacing the areas, that's got to be the way we go. Because right now, somebody brought up earlier, why are we repaving? Can we move the money? We can't let all the other schools trip and fall and have the kids in horrible asphalt conditions while we wait for grass in some areas. So we've got to have help from a bigger source than what we're getting right now.
Or I would just say, related to both of these questions, yes, policy change, but activate parents. Parents are such powerful voices. Your school board members want to hear from parents, your elected officials want to hear from parents. I mean, when we're talking about schools and the school environments, activate parents, get parents to meetings. You know, I mean, LASD taking the step to commit $50 million right now is huge. So the leadership is there, but the parent voices are going to be what makes it a priority. There's a lot of priorities. School administrative principals are overwhelmed right now. It is, I mean, being a principal, I mean, just thank a principal every time you can. It is an unbelievable amount of stress and weight and responsibility right now. But parents will set the priorities. So just tell every parent you know to let their voices be heard with their elected officials, because that is what will change the tide.
That's a great statement. I have lots more questions here. One, just sort of talking about how it takes enormous effort to get things approved through city bureaucracy, and I hear that. But that community organizations and neighborhood councils want to support community recreation schools and are often unsuccessful with moving forward with local ideas presented to Renton Park. And is there a way that Renton Park can tackle the immediate needs presented to them by the community orgs and recreation councils? It could be for shade or air filtration, it could be for other things. While the whole process of moving it through the city bureaucracy is taking place, how can we achieve things quickly?
That's a good question. I think I used to work on the politics side and the elected official side, and our goal and our job is to cut through the red tape. And I think that's partly where the leadership comes in. If there's enough will and leadership out there to cut through the red tape. Because I think Cora, you were the one that mentioned it earlier, the bureaucracy exists for a reason, right? It's for safety, it's to make sure that things are on the up and up, we're not expending dollars where it shouldn't be spent, etc. A lot of those things that may be boring to many of us, but it's there for a reason. So from the elected side, I've been there, I've been through the moments where I probably called someone on Jimmy's side and said, hey, we gotta get this done. And they're like, we can't. We'll find a way to say yes, because we're going to do a press conference tomorrow and we're going to announce this, right? So there's the will to cut through that red tape, and that's where the politicians and the elected offices need to hear your voices to say, hey, this is up front and center. This is what we care about right now. You need to listen to us. This is what we're doing about it. We're getting our ducks in a row. Listen, right? So there is that journey of going through the elected officials. And the reason I say that is because Jimmy mentioned it earlier. when we got the directive from the mayor, or when the mayor put it in the sustainability plan, it is now policy, or it's now on paper, and we now have a direction to go. I'm not saying that the departments don't have their general directions, we do, but the policy part is important, the bureaucracy is important. We need to figure out how to cut through that, but we need that elected office's support. I know it sounds like, oh, you guys just don't want to, think out of the box. It's not about that. We think out of the box all the time. There are things that we've done that nobody knows about, partly because there's a bureaucracy and we're afraid the bureaucracy is going to get us, right? So methodically speaking, I would say that to achieve things in a quicker fashion, you can run on a couple of tracks. You can pilot a program, right? Pilot a program, figure it out. Check to see if this passes muster in the partnerships while concurrently working on policy. I hope that makes sense and I answered it. Jimmy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think to add to that, for the person that asked that question, a lot of times, like Ryan said, is how do we pilot a program, right? While we're waiting for all the bureaucracy to go through. Because very often when you pilot, it's a lot easier to cut through the bureaucracy. So I think that is the courage, is to be able to say, let's pilot it, and how do we put the resource behind it? And as I stated earlier, as far as our department, we are committed to be aggressively getting into these community school parks. We are committed to working with LAUSD to achieve these goals. So it's coming. Just give us some time. It's coming. And I know it's been a long time coming. But we're on board in 10 by the next fiscal year, and in 3 years we'll have 30. There's a young lady back there.
It's her question and your answer.
Okay.
This is my bill.
Yeah.
I'm really supposed to get this for preschools, and I also elected a council member and know all of these wonderful people. And even with the bill, and even connecting with the council, I just want to reflect and use my voice in this platform right now to say it's not working. And I hope that you'll remember the question. We all reach out to you again and say, Brad, you have to help us. Like, we're in an emergency, and I know that everyone's doing this stuff, but I just feel it's really important for us to just lay it all out. So
That's great.
Find us after.
Yes, I hear you. Everyone, I hear all of you. Thank you. What a great panel you guys. Keep up the great work. I'm sorry I wasn't able to ask all the questions, but very
Wonderful people talk about their process and to talk about how they've overcome challenges, but to also recognize and uplift the fact that there are additional challenges to overcome. And that's why we're together. And that's why we want you to fill out your pledge cards and become a part of this Living Schoolyards Coalition. And so Rosa Romero is going to help us do that. But before I pass this off to her, I just want to thank this wonderful moderator and panelists. Thank you so much for and this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of a conversation that needs to keep happening and that we invite you to participate in. Michaela, did you want to? Okay, all right. Okay, so with that in mind, we have a call to action that Rosa Romero is going to kick off.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? How are we feeling? We've been sitting for a long time, and we all have to be outside. But we're kind of in an indoor, outdoor space, which has been beautiful and amazing to be here. My name is Rosa Romero, and I'm with the Urban Environmental Policy Institute at Occidental College. And I want to introduce Raquel Galarza. She's our school wellness coordinator for schools in Northeast Los Angeles, and our fierce parent organizer who has raised 3 children at schools in Northeast LA. To say a few words, her name is Noemi Guerra.
Buenas tardes, ya casi final. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Noemi Guerra. Tengo 5 hijos. Ya casi todos salieron, han terminado, y mi niña que me acompaña este día acaba de terminar la middle school. Pues En observación, ¿verdad?, a todo lo que se ha estado hablando esta mañana, mi comprensión de inglés, puedo comprender, pero es muy difícil para mí hablarlo, y pido disculpas. Pero en observación a este proyecto, en mi opinión, es un excelente proyecto. Viviendo por casi 30 años en el área de Los Ángeles, he sido testiga de cómo los vecindarios han perdido más y más áreas verdes.
So in observing this project, I believe it's an excellent project. And living in LA for almost 30 years, I've witnessed how our neighborhoods have become less and less green.
Nuestros hijos han crecido en un ambiente árido y encerrados en apartamentos, viviendo en apartamentos de 2 recámaras y sin tener un lugar donde correr o jugar.
Our children have been raised in an arid environment and stuck inside apartments, living in these small apartment buildings with no areas to play or run.
Este proyecto fomentaría, en mi opinión, el desarrollo psicomotor de los niños a temprana edad.
This program would stimulate our children's psychomotor skills at an early age.
Expuestos a un medio ambiente natural puede permitirles
Exposed to a natural environment will allow them
mejor salud física, un sistema inmune mejor, salud mental más saludable, especialmente ayudando a niños con hiperactividad.
a stronger immune system, better mental health, and helping children with hyperactivity.
La habilidad de pensamientos más claros y como resultado un mejor rendimiento académico.
It'll help children have more clarity and resulting in better academic performance for our children.
Yo me crié en un ambiente verde y en la actualidad, cuando tengo problemas, quiero pensar, siempre busco caminar en las montañas.
I was actually raised in a very green environment, and today when I need some clarity and just space to think, I like retreating to the mountains.
Mi deseo es que algún día mis nietos puedan gozar de un mundo más verde y mejor.
And my wish is that one day my grandchildren will be able to enjoy a greener and better world. Thank you.
So I want to thank you all. Thank you, Noe, for your words. Thank you all for coming, but I want to stress that this is just the beginning. There's a lot of work ahead of us to make greening and opening of green schoolyards really happen across this city and across this country. We need to organize. And today we can be heard, and this can be done. We need to demand it because it has to happen. So there's a couple steps that we can do. Step one is take out your phone, your email, tweet your board members, sign the Living Schoolyard Coalition pledge form. So there's QR codes on your table. Share them on your social media platforms, and join us for our first organizing meeting on July 29th. And I just want you to remember that this movement requires a grassroots effort. We need our parents, we need our teachers, we need all of you on the ground with community, but also creative and collaborative solutions and advocates within your organizations, which we've heard a lot today. We know the effects on our students, on our communities, and the environment, and luckily we are at a different baseline than we were 10 years ago. You know, terms like environmental justice, social emotional learning, restorative justice, even climate change. We had to talk very basic about this 10 years ago. Now we can use this as our jumping point to really build with everybody. And most of that is in part because of many of you. There's a lot of faces that many of us haven't seen pre-COVID, maybe 10 years ago, and we're joining together again. I want you to look to your left, look to your right, look around. We may come from different areas, from education sectors, from health sectors, from parks, but these are your partners in this growing movement, and it's a movement that's going to center our schools as safe community hubs for learning and reimagining a world that embraces nature as a pathway to nurture our minds, our bodies, and spirit. You are the moment, and this is our moment. And so I wanted to give a big thank you for the Living Schoolyards Coalition for organizing this. And a big thank you to all of you